Save the Semantics, episode 351. It is October 30th, 2025. My name is Myro. This is the podcast where I ramble on for a bit about some shit. Recording this on a Thursday afternoon / evening. I'm feeling a little not weirdly. I'm a little fired up right now. I can't talk about it. Like, I can't delve into it. Maybe I'll talk about it in the future, but I had an exchange earlier today that ticked me off, and I wish I could talk. I wish I could talk about it, but I'll talk about it in the future. It's something, I don't know. It was not very pleasant. It put me in a bad mood, and I'm glad that I'm past that now. I would say I will say what it has done. It's sort of given me time to kind of reflect a little bit and appreciate kind of where I'm currently am, just in the present, and just accept, just being accepting of how things how things have gone relatively well for myself in life. And then I think about, people that are service workers, people that work in restaurants, food preparers, whatever. I just think about the nonsense that they get lobbied by certain customers and stuff, or people who work in retail. And it's just kind of continues to sort of it sort of makes me respect that even more, right? I used to, when I was younger, back in high school, my first job was being, I was working, and, flipping burgers and making milkshakes and that kind of thing. And, there's like a few occasions that come to mind where I had a kind of like an unpleasant interaction with a customer. Luckily it wasn't all that often, because I worked at a more kind of like a touristy attraction location spot, so people generally are going to be happier in those spaces as opposed to I don't know, it's just pharmacies, right? But I do remember one interaction where it was like a big family. They were ordering ice creams. It was late in the day, and one of the ladies just kept changing the order. After she already made the order, she was like, no, actually it was like 3 vanillas instead of 4. She kept doing that. Like we were just scooping up. I remember it was like me and like 3 other people. We were scooping up like, I don't know, it was like 15, 16 like cups of ice cream or something. And like she just kept changing it, or I don't know, it was just late, it was late in the day. We were like about to close. And so, of course, there was just fatigue, and it was the end of the day, and I didn't want to deal with that. And I think I got a little, I remember when I was like, this was like when I was like 15, 16 or something, I was getting a little snippy. I didn't even I was just handing it out. I was just like not aggressively, but I was just like kind of just handing it out without, really acknowledging, but I just remember those situations, and I don't envy people who are currently in those situations. It's hard, man. It's really hard to kind of be like front facing and sort of a front facing customer role. I think that it's tough. It is not easy to constantly interact with people, every type of person, every type of behavior. You don't know what someone is going through. If you're like a cashier, you kind of have to be a blank slate of sorts, or be positive, or be like a net positive. But just put up I don't know, you have to put up face to kind of deal with that kind of thing, and it's not easy. I can remember them. I can remember that feeling of just not wanting to deal. So I think I have whenever someone who is in food service or whatever, of course, like courtesy and stuff is good, but I don't, if they're not giving you 100% of their attention, you cannot, you can't take that personally. I understand, I get it, but you just can't take that response personally because of just like what, like everything, just everything, being in that position, potentially berated by customers, other customers. You cannot, you as like the next customer in line can't take it personally when the cashier is not being all friendly and stuff. Again, courtesy, I totally get that. As long as they're fulfilling they're doing their job and they're not, making it worse for you, and they're being nice or whatever, like that's kind of it, I think. It really is just kind of on more the customers and a lot of the time to be able to, I don't know, not ruin someone's day, I think. So I don't know. I think this interaction that I had earlier today kind of made me sort of reflect on that. And it's good. It's good to sort of think about those things and think about the way in which you present yourself, the way in which you kind of are. I don't know, the vibe you put out tells a lot about yourself, right? I sometimes have to be cognizant of that sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, even when I'm having a bad day or whatever, I can't be grumpy and grouchy, like stomping my feet around town. I can't do that because other people are going to pick up on that. And you just can't put that kind of energy out there. You know what I mean? You feeling grumpy is absolutely justified. It is just a matter of the way in which you kind of carry yourself. You don't have to like put up a front. You don't have to fake anything. You can admit that you had a bad day, but don't put that on like other people, right? I think is something to really just remind yourself. You just can't do that, because then you're going to ruin someone else's day. And yeah, and then the energy you put out also creates the environment around you as well. So I don't know. I've been kind of after that today, I've just been thinking a little bit about that. I'm like, there's a reason why this ticked me off, was because of, I think there was a clash between myself and the people that I was interacting with. And that happens, you know what I mean? That absolutely happens. But especially if you're trying to, I don't know, if you're trying to have a conversation, you should at least come into it with some warmth and some grace, I think. That was just not the environment that I was in when I had this interaction. And I think that kind of gives I was immediately sort of put off by the conversation that I had with these people. Because they just were just completely just like stone-faced and stone-walled. There was no levity. Like, I was trying to create some levity, and neither of them were obliging. I'm like, is this really what we're doing right now? So yeah, maybe I'll talk about it in the future in further detail, but yeah, that just kind of had me thinking about stuff. Thinking about the past and how we sort of, the energy we put out. It's important, right? Like, you just can't do that. You just can't do that, because people will see that, and sometimes I don't want to say like feed into it, but people will see some type of bad energy, bad attitude being put up, and it kind of ruins the mood in a lot of ways. It's the same situation. Say you're in a friend group and there's one person, most everybody else is having a good time, one person is not having a good time. And again, there are cases in which it is, you should feel, it's okay to not feel great, but you can't just be, you just can't be like mopey and stuff, because it doesn't, I just don't think it bodes well. I think there are ways in which, there are situations in which you can be like, hey, I'm not feeling great. And if I'm not, if I'm not matching the rest of the group's energies, understand that I'm not trying to bring it down. I'm just, you're just dealing with something, and you're just sort of telling that, right? But you cannot, I don't know. There has to be some type of balance, of sorts. I think if you're going into something, say an event or whatever, the unfortunate thing is that there might be someone who is dealing with something, and might bring a certain energy, and that isn't to say that they can't vent about it. That's not what I'm trying to say. I just think that there are healthy ways to vent without bringing the energy down in a particular space. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I think it's hard sometimes to convey that. It's hard sometimes for someone to be able to express themselves, because it's hard, right? Like, you know, I think it's so hard to strike a balance sometimes where, say someone, or yourself is dealing with something, and you just need to talk to someone, but you're in a situation that it isn't the best for that. It's hard. It's like, oh, the people that care for you are going to be there for you, but also there is kind of a right time to be able to talk about those things too. And I think it's about striking that social interaction balance, which I think it's hard. I think if you are going through something, I think the best way to deal with that, and if you need to talk to your friends or family or whatever, is to kind of set maybe aside some time. I think that's a bit more effective than trying to bring that into a conversation where it's not I don't know, where it doesn't like match the energy. I know I get it. It's hard. I think it's just sort of the context matters in which you're having a certain type of conversation, right? If it's a more serious conversation, then you kind of reserve that. So you maybe reserve that for a more intimate conversation with one of your closer friends or something along those lines. I don't know. Anyways, this has been having me just go all over the place with things, but yeah, that's what I've been thinking about today. Basketball. So Warriors last game they played was against the Clippers, which they won in a pretty convincing fashion, especially kind of in the second half of the game, where they extended the lead and didn't really look back. It was a pretty kind of surprising result, considering that the Clippers have historically beaten us over the last few seasons. Especially someone like Zubats has had our number. But things worked out. The rotations were good. The younger players have continued to contribute. Steph did not have a particularly great game, but it was just kind of a balanced effort from the entire team, and I thought that was really commendable. It was a fun watch, and it's a continuation over the last few games of the formula, this team chemistry, the system. Will Richards, the system. Will the system Richards, as I kind of coin him. It's good stuff, and I don't really have too much more to add, other than there seems to be something clicking and I'm hoping that it is going to be sustainable moving forward through the rest of the season, because I think there will be games where the older players are going to miss time, and it's going to be a matter of trying to alleviate that absence with one of the younger players, right? And if they're able to replicate some of the play of the starting five in particular, I think that is like a huge boost, right? I think if someone like Pajemski is able to step up in Steph's absence and put up his own numbers, make up for the lack of quantity and shots from Steph. If Moses Moody is able to kind of slot in and continue to hit threes like he has, I think that there's gonna be times that they can handle not having Jimmy or Steph or Draymond and Horford, right? Especially Horford when he's not playing on back-to-backs. I think just having a multitude of players that can slot in and play the system of play that that has been emphasized with this current Warriors team, I think that can be sustainable through the course of a season, because they don't have to rely on Steph anymore, basically, to carry them. Of course, there's going to be games where he's going to need to be the one and to step in and make the shots, like in the Nuggets game, right? But if we can replicate the style of play that they have done in the Clippers game in other instances, I think this feels like a recipe for success. And I'm excited to see kind of how that looks. They're going to be playing the Bucks next. They've been kind of on a bit of a roll. Giannis has been he's been on an absolute tear, and I think that's going to be a tough one, right? Although I do believe the last time the Warriors played the Bucks, they did win, I think, if I'm not mistaken, when they were in Chase Center. But it's not going to be easy, right? I think Draymond does a pretty good job against Giannis for as good of a job as he can. I think maybe Kuminga can kind of help out with at least like the physicality of Giannis a little bit. I do remember, I don't know if it was last year or maybe 2 years ago, because Trayce Jackson-Davis is just not really in the rotation anymore, although he did get some minutes in the Clippers game. But I remember he had some moments against Giannis, I think a couple of seasons ago, which I thought was pretty impressive, where he blocked a shot and then also I think dunked on him or something. That's probably going to be like the highlight of his career. But I guess he could throw in Trayce if you need to. I just don't, if they really need to, I guess they have that option. But it's going to be a tough cover. And they've been playing well. If they can just take advantage of the non-Giannis minutes, I think they'll be all right. Because the Bucks team is so heavily centered on Giannis that I think, I don't know, are their secondary players going to be able to step up? We'll see. But I think if he's off the court, they should really just take advantage of that. And they can have rotations where, they have Jimmy in, letting him do his thing, or Steph in and letting him run, running the offense through him, that kind of thing, right? So they have options there, and they could probably stagger that effectively against the Bucks. So I feel decent about that matchup, but it still might be tough. Is that tonight, actually? I think that might actually be tonight. I need to double check. It's either tonight or Friday. It's not Friday. No, it's not Friday, because Friday is the Cup games, which I'll get to in a little bit. So I think it is tonight, right? Because last night, no, it was 2 nights ago when they played the Clippers. So it's tonight. Yeah. So I guess I'll talk about that, game maybe tomorrow or this weekend. NBA Cup. I don't know who really cares about the cup. I don't mind it. I mean, it's just, again, it's just regular basketball or regular season basketball with a different coat of paint. But that coat of paint is kind of interesting. I am curious to see what the courts look like. I did see the Phoenix one. That kind of hurts my eyes. I hope the other, because there were games last year. There were NBA Cup games last year where I actually could not look at the court. I think it was the Hawks game in particular that really, they went for this yellow linoleum pea color. It was just, I was like, why did they do that color? It did not look good. It hurt my eyes watching the TV, and I was just like, I can't watch this game. The court is hurting my eyes. So I'm hoping that with other instances, there are no, like, there aren't any, just make the courts a little bit more friendly for my eyes, please, Anyways, the cup starts, the race to the cup starts on Friday. And I don't know. So the last two champions have been, well, it's been going for just 2 years now. The last two champions were the Bucks and the Lakers, both older teams. So that does kind of favor the Warriors. Last year, what happened last year? They lost to the Rockets. They lost to the Rockets in the semifinals or something like that. Or not the semifinals, the quarterfinals. I think they got eliminated in Houston. There was like an awful call. Yeah, I remember now. Yeah, they made this really, it was like a foul call when it should have been a jump ball, and then the Rockets won. And then they went to the semifinals, and I think they lost to the Thunder. And then the Thunder and the Bucks were in the championship, and then the Bucks won. If memory serves, was kind of the sequence of events, I believe. Anyways, yeah. We'll see if there's going to be a different... I mean, I don't know what to expect, because it's hard to gauge and to think about how much importance players and teams put into this. I think the big thing that I've seen people point out is that, whoever wins the cup, the teams deeper in the roster are the ones that get that get kind of like a pretty significant amount of reward money. The max contract players and the ones that are making tens of millions probably is not as significant, but I guess you get some voting, some bragging rights. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just more basketball. I'm not complaining. It's really not. There's just one additional game in Vegas, right? Outside of that, it's, or I guess, 3 if you count the semifinals, but one more additional game outside of that for for one that counts in the win and loss columns. But yeah, I mean, I think it might be fun. I think, is there going to be a team with younger players that maybe get this one? Or is it going to be a continuation of a trend where the older veteran team gets it because maybe this is their chance of winning something, right? In the case of the Bucks last year and in the case of the Lakers 2 years ago. And maybe this is the chance for the Warriors, a team for the Warriors. I think the Clippers might be a good one as well, right? So maybe this is like the old man cup is sort of the way it's looking. I mean, it's only been 2 years. Maybe that trend changes, but especially in a single elimination format, right? I think this favors the team that has experience. Maybe, I don't know. Is that a fair assessment? I have no idea. But it'll be fun. It'll be fun. It creates some stakes. There were some good cup games last year. I expect that there will be some good cup games this year as well. So, anyways, just wanted to hop on for a bit, talk a bit, quick updates, rant a bit, that sort of thing. Yeah, I'll catch back up on either Friday or this weekend to talk about those games or talk about anything else. Alrighty, recording this on November 3rd. It is a Monday afternoon / evening as I am recording this. I wanted to record earlier this weekend, but just didn't have the time to. I think it's actually a decent point in time to kind of go over the past weekend, most notably talk about some of the Warriors' struggles in their last couple of games, and then just kind of talk about, kind of what, how they can bounce back from those losses. But daylight savings yesterday, time change, adjusting to it. It's a lot darker now, which is both good and bad, I would say. I don't mind cooler weather. You just lose a little bit of or I think it's the end of daylight savings rather. So you lose a little bit of sunlight, which I guess you have to take it or leave it, Anyways, let's talk some basketball, and then I'll get into some other stuff. But Warriors lost in a couple of disappointing wins in their last couple of games against some undermanned teams in the Milwaukee Bucks and the Indiana Pacers. Both games felt kind of like a bit of a collapse towards the end. I think the Bucks less so. The Pacers one definitely, where they let up a double-digit lead in the fourth quarter and could not close out with Steph and Draymond. I think they were sort of the culprit. Some of the issues that they had executing down the stretch, I think you could sort of point to them as not executing, which it's fine. It happens, right? I think the concern with these losses, right? It's early in the season, of course, way too early to make any determinations. I think the issue with these losses is that they feel very reminiscent of games from last year. Like, it felt like a callback to last year before the Jimmy trade, when they just kept losing games against teams that they really shouldn't have, teams that did not have their star players, right? Those teams are going to come out and give the Warriors the best shot, right? And I think there's kind of this sort of lackadaisical effort that we saw in these last two games, especially trying to, finish it down the stretch. And I think that it was very evident that there was just kind of this lack of cohesion. They were trying to have, I don't know, they were trying to have Kuminga do something. He had a good game in both games, but in the Indiana game, and they kind of left him on an island, like had him tried to go 1-on-1, and that didn't really go all that well. So the off ball movement, maybe Draymond trying to kind of initiate the offense was not happening at all. And then just some real head scratching moments, some fouls. Indiana was pretty early into the bonus in the fourth quarter, so that definitely contributed to to them giving up some points. But it just was kind of it was reminiscent of the pre-Jimmy Butler Warriors, where they just kind of took the foot off the gas. Blew a double-digit lead. I mean, they were far worse losses last year when they blew like multiple 20-point leads. But there are kind of remnants of that with this particular with these last two games. And yeah, I think that's something that I hope they can kind of curb moving forward, because you just don't want that kind of lingering. I understand that they'll probably be in the process of trying to ramp up for the playoffs and everything, and they're not going to take every single win as like a must win. But unfortunately, I think I probably quoted this last time I recorded, but unfortunately in the Western Conference, every win matters. It's going to be even more of just a fight for playoff positioning. You got teams like San Antonio and Portland kind of creeping up in there, along with all the other teams that already kind of exist in that mix. I just am like, it's gonna be one of those things where in like March or in April, they'll be looking back and wishing that they got one of these wins, because it's gonna count in a lot of instances. Now, it worked out last year. They got the 7th seed through the play-in. They got a favorable matchup with the Rockets, although it did not look favorable at certain points in the series. They still won it eventually. But it's one of those things. I just don't know. Like, I would love for them to avoid the play-in altogether. I think just one less extra game, much needed, is just, you essentially have a few days of rest. Or, if you're a, 7-8 seed, you have one extra game. And instead of having to do that, you'll just get like half a week of rest, which I think is huge for this particularly old team in the Warriors. And I just don't, I think that's something that they should really try to avoid. And I think they understand that, right? I think it was just, it just wasn't like a great weekend for them. And hopefully they can kind of sort things out. They have 2 days in between. They're not playing tonight. They'll be playing tomorrow night. But it's, it's just kind of like a little bit of a head scratcher, maybe some cause for concern, but nothing too big. I think it's just something to kind of keep an eye on moving forward. If they have more of these types of performances, right, where they underperform or they let go of a lead and those kinds of things, there's going to be something to have to be discussed, right? But right now, I just don't think you can necessarily overreact. I think once it becomes like an extended losing streak, that's when you kind of have to start looking at, I don't know, just like there's something not working with the current rotations and everything. I mean, Horford has looked pretty slow with that starting unit. I think he absolutely got cooked on some plays in both games. I think Draymond has had some moments, but overall he has not looked super impressive during this part of the regular season, which I get it. I'm sure he's of the mindset of looking forward into the future, but again, these wins do count, unfortunately. So it's like you kind of have to lock in basically to from now on. It's hard to be able to kind of let go of the rope with how tight everything is in the Western Conference. So yeah, there's definitely things you can kind of pick at following these losses. I think it's one of the more, it's like a little bit of adversity, I think. I guess if you look at it one way, a little bit of adversity earlier on in the season might be a good thing. Plenty of teams turn around, like there's plenty of time. Again, all that stuff I think counts and is valid. But I just think that, there's some things to kind of look at if you want to do like a sort of a bit of an earlier evaluation of the season. Other basketball, other NBA stuff. So I talked about the Spurs and Portland kind of being in the mix. So the Spurs finally lost against the Suns of all teams, which I thought was interesting last night. And Portland beat Denver, I think, on Halloween. That was kind of like a notable game from them. Some very questionable calls down the stretch, but I mean, I think Denver also had a lot of chances to try to close it out, and they just couldn't. So you could argue that it's a little bit of both, but you know, you could absolutely say that the Blazers fought and were able to get a win despite everything. So you have to kind of give them props for that. I think that they're going to continue to be a problem for a lot of teams. On the offensive side of the ball, I think there's going to be some issues for them to try to score. They just don't have a go-to scorer at this point. Like Shaedon Sharpe hasn't quite developed that yet. I think having like a 34, 35-year-old Drew Holiday be that guy is not exactly going to be the most reliable, although he has had a pretty good season so far. But yeah, just like their defensive identity, the way in which they have just a bunch of rangy wings, one of my favorite players in Toumani Camara, just going out there, just defending everything, I think is like a huge part of their success so far. And I feel like that's probably going to be, however far they get, whether it is into the postseason or however high they get up in the standings, I think is going to be a recipe for their success, at least for this year, right? And then we'll see what it looks like next year. They're going to be a very interesting team next year with Dame coming back. I'm curious to see if he's going to be like starting for them or if he's going to be coming off the bench for them. That's a whole nother conversation, right? But their identity right now is very much like fast, just length everywhere, defense, just being annoying, right? Kind of similar to, kind of like a bit of a mold of like an OKC, but a little different. I think sort of their wings depth in particular, I think is pretty impressive. But yeah, I think they're gonna be one of those teams that the Warriors are gonna have to kind of look at, right? They lost to them on a back-to-back, which I think I kind of made the case as a bit of a scheduled loss, but I think in a situation where there is like, the schedule lines up in both teams' favor, it's not going to be an easy game. I don't think it's going to be an easy fight at all. They have plenty of players that they can throw at Curry. I just think defensively they're just so much bigger than the Warriors. That's going to be a problem for them. They have the athleticism to counter a lot of what the Warriors have. So that's something to kind of be. They're kind of the epitome of the team that I think I would be worried about facing off, during the regular season and also maybe in the postseason. Right, that's a little too far into the future, but I think that they're one of like the teams that are sort of a kryptonite of the Warriors because of their size, length, and athletic ability. So, just kind of putting a pin in that team in particular. The Chicago Bulls. I talked about them recently. They finally lost against the Knicks on Sunday. I was kind of curious to see how they would perform after winning their game on Friday, I believe. Yeah, Friday was Halloween. I thought that was pretty, it was pretty impressive, 5-0, and then, another 5-1, which I think is, it's kind of like, okay, they finally sort of maybe came back down to earth a little bit. This next stretch is apparently going to be pretty difficult for them. They're going up against a lot of tough opponents, so this might be a bit of a challenge for them in particular. So I'll be interested in seeing how they perform. They're kind of like right now, they're kind of like my second team right now. Out of everybody, they're the ones that I'm paying the attention to the most because of their play. Obviously, going undefeated in the first 5 games, I think is opens up some eyes. But they're just they're very different from anybody else out there. And they've had some early success, and I think that might be something to just continue checking out. And they're just a fun watch. I've noted this before, but they're kind of like, they've been sort of like my secondary team for quite some time, but this year in particular, they're kind of like I wouldn't say must watch, but they're definitely a team that I like to be able to watch, if like the Warriors are not on at the same time. So they're kind of my East Coast team right now. All of the other East Coast teams that I was curious in watching, including like the Hawks, have not really have not really been all that impressive so far. I get like the Hawks are going to be missing Trae Young for a little bit of time. We'll see how well they perform against teams without him. Maybe there's going to be a bit of a increase in terms of their defensive identity without having to cover up for Trae. But I do think that it's going to be a bit shaky for them. I just think that when you don't have like a floor general of Trae Young's capability, I think that kind of that significantly lowers your offensive ability and your offensive ceiling. So maybe they'll be able to kind of counter that defensively. We'll see how that goes. Other teams, the Magic, they've been able to kind of pick up some wins against some bad teams, so they're kind of they're doing a little better, right? Like, I think wins kind of solve everything. There's definitely still issues with that team in regards to especially on the offensive side of the ball, but and on the defensive side too. But it looks like they've been able to kind of hold opponents to under or near 100, as opposed to giving up like 130 points in losses. So maybe they were able to figure something out, or they just happen to be playing some bad teams. But every win matters. I think every win matters at this point. So yeah, there's a lot of teams right now that are missing players. So it's a little hard to kind of evaluate them at this point. Like the Wolves are missing Ant. The Lakers have been just kind of on and off. Like, they've been able to win games, but they've been missing like Luka, obviously LeBron. Now they're missing Austin Reeves like tonight. So it's like there's I don't know. There's like some injury concern with that team. Memphis, they freaking suspended Ja Morant for comments about his coach, or just going against his coach. So that was kind of the headline for this weekend. As I said before, Memphis is just such a confusing team. I have no idea what that team is. They're just stuck in this kind of weird spot where they can be good enough, but unfortunately due to injury luck and the fact that their star player is very inconsistent in terms of his ability to kind of show up. And kind of what he's able to bring to the team. I just think that there's not like a lot to really invest in with the Grizzlies in particular. They just don't have like the same teeth as they did earlier on in Morant's career. They just are. They're just not. I just don't know if they have that kind of edge anymore. I think losing players like Dylan Brooks, Desmond Payne, those kinds of things, like it's like a huge like roster restructuring, and I guess it didn't seem like Ja particularly handled that very well. I don't think he's really handled a lot of things very well on and off the court. So we'll see. I mean, he's an incredible player, but I think there's a lot to kind of like, there's a lot to really question about whether he will be kind of like the best franchise player moving forward for them, regardless of what the team looks like around him. So there's been a lot of conversations going on about what the future of him on the Grizzlies look like, and there's also conversations about Zion. So like the top two of that rookie class of 2019, right, of Zion and Ja, having, unfortunately, I mean, I think in the case of Zion, it really is less, I don't know, I think for this season in particular, it's more about just like front office malpractice, really. But you could also point to injury luck, or maybe just like his inability to stay in shape and stuff like that. But I just think it's really interesting that the top two prospects for that draft class are now might not be the franchise player for their respective teams. So that's something that I just kind of took a note of. But yeah, just wanted to kind of hop on, talk a little bit of some more basketball, talk a little bit about the Warriors' kind of struggles here and there. One thing I want to talk about. So another thing. So I technically beat Ball Pit last night. I sort of beat kind of the main campaign, if you want to call it that, and I unlocked New Game Plus. It feels kind of similar to Rogue Legacy 2, where you can kind of continue to sort of play these levels and continue to challenge yourself with more difficult levels. So I think I'll just probably continue to play this as long as I'm interested. It's a good game to have in the background, that's for sure. It's just kind of like you could also have there's a character in the game, you could just have him autoplay, just let him do the work. So that's kind of funny. So you could do it that way as well. But yeah, it's just like a fun. It's a great game. It's definitely one of my favorite games of this year. And again, yeah, I think I'll just continue to play this as just like a fun side game for as long as it kind of keeps my interest. And maybe soon I'll probably dive into Trails again. It was a nice little break from jumping from like The Witcher. I did play Trails like afterwards, but I was like, I think I need to give a little bit of, I think I need some breathing room between these massive games. So yeah, maybe I'll dive into Trails sometime this week or this weekend, depending on how I feel. Yeah, the next thing that I'm excited for in terms of new releases is Kirby Air Riders. That's going to be a big one later this month. So I'll definitely be picking that up, playing that during like the summer, or not the summer, during the winter. I think that'll be like a fun, cozy game, fun multiplayer game. It's going to be so wild playing that game again. There's also, with like the older courses and the older content, that's going to be so interesting to play that. It's going to be just like whoa, bringing me back. I'm feeling giddy. I'm feeling very excited for that. So that's coming up later this month. That's probably the big thing in terms of gaming that I'm most looking forward to. But yeah, quick little update here. That's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for listening. As always, this has been Save the Semantics, signing off.